Well, this is number 13 in the series, so we've come to the conclusion
Finale.
of this Table Talk series.
We've exhausted the book of Revelation.
We have not exhausted it, that's for sure. There's so much that we didn't touch upon, but I'm just wondering, before we launch into Revelation 21 and 22, what would be the highlight for you so far? A point of discovery, a point of insight, something you're like, wow, that was time well spent.
I know this is going well back and there's been lots of highlights, but I loved the section on Revelation 4 and 5. That was growing out of the sermon that you preached recently that I heard on that, and then the opportunity to discuss it as a group. I loved it.
Revelation 4 and 5, what about you, James?
12. Revelation 12 is always my favorite, and it's just amazing what is in there. I love that whole concept that's developed there of the woman bringing forth the man-child who answers the accusations of Satan and vanquishes all of the opposition of the accuser and just delivers his people. I just love that whole picture. That great controversy picture is beautiful.
How about you, Jeffrey?
I loved Revelation 14, and I love that passage, here's the patience of the saints, those who keep the commandments of God in the faith of Jesus.
That was great.
Yeah, that was a highlight for me. It's Jesus' faith that basically projects to us and we respond to it. I think that was a highlight.
There was so much good stuff. Mine is
Ty, what's
more
yours?
recent, and that is the full disclosure idea, or the
That was
exact
last session.
Yeah, last session.
Yeah, that was
the,
good.
the
Sounds
language where it says in chapter 19, verse 11, that that's speaking of, he judges, Jesus judges. The Father has given him judgment, and then in chapter 20, verse 4, and he, Jesus, commits judgment to us. That's an incredible revelation of God's character
really
for me, that he commits judgment to us and he puts himself out there to be evaluated and to disclose everything. I liked your language very much. The what is it?
Declassified.
Yeah, declassifying all the documents of the Great War between good and evil. You know, all of history. It's all on the table. Evaluate it. What does everybody think?
It bodes really well, I think, for the series that I was right at the beginning. My highlight was 4 and 5. You were 12, which is getting midway through. You were 14, which is getting toward the end, and you're just 20.
Yeah, I just noticed that.
That's a good sign.
That's great.
Yeah.
I have absolutely loved this series. It's been so easy, not in the sense that we've been dealing always with easy material, but just
the
it's just
discussion's
bubbling,
been
bubbling,
flowing.
bubbling.
Yeah.
I love it.
I think we should acknowledge the fact that we know we haven't exhausted the book of Revelation, and we know that we may have said some stuff along the way that we didn't give enough clarity on, that we could have made clearer.
Or spend enough time on.
Or spend enough time on. But we're not here to give all the answers anyway.
That's the point.
We're here to model and to share Bible study, and we're hoping that people will not say, okay, that was finality, those guys shared everything. No, we didn't. We just scratched the surface,
racing
and now
by
we're
things.
racing.
And even hoping that there would be some disagreement on some minor point here and there that would just stimulate more
Proves
thought.
that we're thinking.
Yeah.
So we want people to study, to read for themselves, and not just say, okay, that was it, that's the definitive word on Revelation. It's not.
Right.
It's not the definitive word, but Jesus is the definitive word.
There you go.
He is the faithful and true witness that gives full revelation to the character of God, that makes it possible for us to see who God really is, and then in response to that revelation, to ourselves become a revelation to the world that fills the world with the glory of God, not because we have any glory in ourselves as the church of God, but it's His glory, and we're tapping into it, and we're experiencing it. So we're at Revelation 21 and 22 now. This is, in fact, the grand finale. The book is now coming to a conclusion, and I would have to say that Revelation 21 and 22 stands apart, head and shoulders above anything that's ever been written to describe what the world should be like. And what the world eventually will be like. You can't help but read this and find it attractive and beautiful, even if, I don't know if you guys think this is accurate or not, but even if you believe it's fiction,
Still beautiful.
it's still, even if you think it's not true, you can't help but read this and wish it were true.
I say that a lot in my preaching. I say the story of God becoming a man and dying for his undeserving, apathetic creation is a story that just on aesthetic grounds you can appreciate. You might say, I think it's a fairy tale, I think it's a fiction, I don't believe it. But aesthetically, that is in the words of Alvin Plantinga, it's not just the greatest story ever told, it's the greatest story that ever could be told.
You can't imagine anything better.
No, you can't.
And the reason I think it's important to frame it like that and to say, even if you don't believe it's true, you will find yourself attracted to it, I think the point there is to say this: the fact that you find it attractive indicates that it's true.
It has a resonance.
That's right. It has a resonance. You're like, oh, my heart really longs for that kind of world. Well, why do you long for that kind of world?
Not having even read any of the last 2 chapters, but isn't it powerful that the last 2 chapters basically bridge back to the first 2 chapters of the whole Bible?
Oh, unpack that, Jeffrey.
And the fact that in the last 2 chapters of the Bible, chapter 21, chapter 22 of Revelation, you have this restored world. Restored world, and there's no signs of the curse, there's no signs of sin, of suffering, of pain, of death. All that has been removed, and what you have here is just this new flourishing of a new beginning. And in my mind, I always think the end of the Bible is really just announcing
the beginning,
the new beginning. And so because it ends that way, it wraps back to Genesis 1 and 2, because in the first 2 chapters of the book of Genesis, you have this Edenic creation, this beautiful environment that God created. No sin, no pain, no suffering, no death. These are bookends, and they're perfectly complementary. And you were saying that something instinctively within us, even if we don't buy the story, we're like, this is beautiful, I wish that were true. Maybe the reason is because it's anchored back in the original story of humanity, Genesis 1 and 2. We are from Eden.
Yeah. It's like we have amnesia.
Yeah.
And
we forgot where we're from.
You see something beautiful, and it wants to trigger your memory. Oh, wait a minute, I feel like that's who I am.
It's in our DNA.
That's how I'm supposed to. That's the way.
That's a good illustration.
Who am I? And the memories are coming back little bit by bit when you encounter beauty. Beauty, Genesis 1 and 2, a world without evil, suffering, and sin. And Revelation 21 and 22, a world without evil, suffering, and sin. You encounter those ideas and you think, maybe I'm meant to be something more. Maybe the world is meant to be something more. And the amnesia starts to lift.
It's like you're sitting on the rocking chair looking at the photo album, and you got this amnesia, and you're just flipping through the pictures.
I love that illustration.
And it's triggering memories, and you see a picture. Who's that? Wait, that looks really familiar. Wait a second, that's my wife, or that's my dad, and it's slowly coming to you. And as these images become fresh on your memory, then you start piecing together a narrative. Where do these pictures fit into my story? And then your story comes alive.
Okay, so let's look at the text. So Revelation.
It's like reverse Alzheimer's.
Yes, reverse Alzheimer's.
You're getting clarity, you're getting lucidity.
So Revelation 21 and 22, just starting with verse 1 of chapter 21, now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth have passed away. Also there was no more sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God. And God shall wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. Verse 5, then he who sat on the throne said, behold, I make all things new. And he said to me, write, for these words are true and faithful. Isn't that incredible?
Yeah, I noticed how you stop naturally right there. And that's the way I as you read these verses, that's the way it comes across. It comes across as though the first 4 verses are revealing something so tremendously beautiful and significant and powerful that by the time he gets to the 4th verse, it's like, I can't continue. I got to stop right now just for a second here, and I've got to really affirm and assure everyone that everything I just said is true. Everything I just said is faithful. yes, God, the God of the universe, is going to actually inhabit planet Earth with his people. He's going to tabernacle with them. This is going to become, this fallen world of all of his unfallen world, of all his created universe, this fallen world is going to become the center of the universe. And if anyone wants to visit with God or see God, and I'm talking in the context here of the fact that there are other worlds in Hebrews and in Job, it talks about the sons of God, representatives of other worlds. If anyone wants to come and actually visit God, see God, they're going to come to planet Earth. This Earth is going to become the center. This one blight in the universe is going to become the place where God dwells. And he stops right there. And of course, all of that's included in there is the wiping away of the tears, no more death, no more sorrow. But he stops right there and he's saying, now, I probably need to assure you, Ty, that what I'm saying is true and faithful.
This will happen.
This is going to happen. This seems amazing, but this is going to happen. Because this is God's character. God is a God who is gracious. God is a God who is loving. His love is unconditional. And so this is kind of like, we think we're done with Revelation. We think we're done with this exposition of the character of God. What is God like? We think we're done with that when we get to, this is just kind of closing it up. No, this is the capstone. The actual final cherry on the top type of revelation that we're getting here is, yes, I've delivered you from sin. Yes, I've taken care of the beast. Yes, I've taken care of all pain and suffering. But there's one more thing you need to know. I'm going to come and live with you. I'm coming to planet Earth. That's going to be the center of the universe from now. I'm going to be actually living on planet. My city where I dwell is going to come down to planet Earth, and that's where I'm going to live.
I will be with you for all eternity.
Just a question here I'm going to throw out. It says God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. How do you think that will actually happen? I don't know the answer per se. I'm just throwing it out there. How will God wipe away our tears?
Well, it's poetic for sure. So
he's not physically coming with the
walking
tissue
around to the multiplied millions of redeemed saying yours and then yours and yours necessarily. It's poetically describing the fact that God is going to comfort and heal the sorrows that have weighed heavy on our hearts. And I think it's interesting that it's coming out of chapter 20. So they've been with Christ for 1,000 years. All judgment was committed to them.
There you go.
The whole full disclosure process.
That's right.
Now, if you think about it, there are some people that even against the overwhelming evidence of God's goodness and the overwhelming outpouring of God's grace, there are some people who are lost. So during the 1,000-year millennium, where this full disclosure process is taking place, it's easy to imagine that there's going to be a lot of crying because we're looking, as David said, all the documents are now on the table, and we're going to have questions. God, what about her? Why isn't she here? And God is going to show the records, the interactions, the providences. He's going to explain. He doesn't want any lingering questions in our minds, and there's going to be tears. And so when we come to Revelation chapter 21, this is one of the most tender pictures of God imaginable. Anybody who sees tears forming in someone's eyes and trickling down their cheeks that would be inclined to want to lean into that and to wipe those tears away, that's a lot of sympathy, that's a lot of love. That's a beautiful picture of the fact that God isn't merely powerful, he's all powerful, but he's not merely all powerful.
Yes.
God isn't merely holy, he's holiness itself. God is love, and he feels the feelings of others, and he's reaching out to comfort. And he's saying, hey, it's gonna be okay. Eternity now is going to stretch out before you, and there's going to be, well, later on it says that the leaves of the tree of life are for the healing of the nations. That's after. I don't know exactly what that means.
That's after sin and
after sin is completely destroyed, and you're in the new heavens and the new earth. We're still healing, not healing from sin. People aren't still sinning and repenting, but there's definitely some residual damage, emotional damage that sin has caused, and there's going to be a healing process for some time. How long, I don't know. Nobody knows, but I think that's what's going on with the tears, Jeffrey.
Yeah,
Boy,
it's beautiful.
I really like that picture, Ty, because that takes us to another level. I have often grab some Kleenex for someone who's been crying, either in the church. It was funny because we just had the chairs in our church cleaned, professionally cleaned, and the guy that did it, came to do it, his business, he made a comment to one of the members. He said, boy, that opened the door for me. He said, this is really an emotional church, huh? And she said, well, why would you say that? Because you guys have boxes of Kleenexes under all of the pews. And I've often grabbed a Kleenex or grabbed the box, but rarely have I taken a Kleenex and gone up and wiped the tears that are, I'm thinking, wow. What kind
is a
of
tender
picture?
That's another level of
picture.
tenderness.
What a picture is that?
It is. There's another one that
Whoa.
parallels that, James, that I think is beautiful back in Isaiah, where Isaiah is describing the Messiah suffering, and the Father says, I'll hold your hand through it. That's in the Bible. Messiah is going to be incarnate, he's going to suffer, but God says, but I'll hold your hand.
I love
Hold
it.
your
I
hand?
love it. I love
Who
it.
holds hands? Whose hand do you hold?
wow.
It's
Yeah.
a very tender God
Yeah.
that we're dealing with.
I love it.
One of my favorite things to do is to hold my boys' hands.
Really?
Yeah. Even though they're 15 and 13, they don't. They have not.
It's not one of their favorite things for you.
No.
Is it?
No, absolutely. My son, my 15-year-old boy Landon, will regularly reach out and grab my hand, walking through the mall, walking at a.
I love that.
I love it too because he's not yet been exposed. Nobody's like razzed him and said, "Hey, that's not cool. What are you doing?"
Yeah.
He doesn't know that that's not cool. If he,
It is cool, though. It is cool.
That's my
But it
point.
is the
That's
very
my point.
definition
Good.
of cool. I was returning shoes one time in a department store, and Sue and my son Jason were circling the block because they weren't going to park. I was going to do this real quick, get back in the car, but it was taking longer than it should take, and so Sue sent Jason in. He at this point he's like 18 years old. And this 18-year-old boy comes in as I'm doing business with the person behind the counter, and he just comes up, he sees so he's not going to interrupt, he just comes up and he throws his arms around my shoulders and my neck, and he just hangs his chin on my shoulder and just waits for it
I've
to
seen
get
him
done.
do that. I've seen him do that.
He still does that to
Yeah.
this day.
Yeah.
And he just wraps his arms and he holds on to me.
Beautiful.
And then he whispers, we're going to loop one more time, and then he goes out. And the lady that I'm returning the shoes to, I'm thinking nothing of it.
Yeah, normal.
This is your normal.
Yeah, this lady, she looks at me, she says, who was that? And I said, well,
He's like, I
that's-
don't know, some
That's
stranger.
my son. And she began to cry.
Wow.
Whoa.
She began to cry. She said, I would
starting to cry, too.
I would love for my son to love his father like that.
That's awesome.
So
That's
what
awesome.
you're
Thank you,
describing, David,
Jesus.
what you're describing, your 15-year-old son holding your hand, that is cool.
way cool.
The whole universe eventually is going to look like that.
Amen.
That's
the whole
awesome.
universe is going to be filled
No
with
shame.
that kind of tenderness.
Genuine affection, no shame, no humiliation, no concern about what others think.
Yeah, love it. So we haven't even, we need some Kleenex
Get us
here.
some Kleenex. Okay, I need a break.
But we do have to take a break, and then we'll come back and continue on.
This is the story of Naima, who took a bus to the doctor and found a piece of paper with words of hope about Jesus, which was left by a church member who unpacked a box that came from a truck, which drove in from Durban, where a ship was docked, that sailed from Seattle, loaded with containers, stacked high with millions of tracts, trucked in from the Lightbearers Publishing House, where more than 600 million pieces of gospel literature have been printed in 42 languages. Here's the amazing thing. Lightbearers distributes this literature free of charge, all over the world. And each piece costs only 5 pennies to print, transport, and deliver. Every day, millions of people buy a $5 cup of coffee. $5 a cup, 5 days a week. It adds up fast. But at just 5 cents a piece, that same $25 can also ship 500 pieces of literature and give hope to people like Naima, who shared that paper with a classmate, who gave it to her cousin, who shared it with his boss, who passed it to her grandmother, who left it on another bus, where it will be found by someone else. And the story continues. 5 cents doesn't buy a lot these days, but in other parts of the world, your nickel could change someone's life. Your gift of $25 a month sends out 6,000 pieces of gospel literature each year. $50 sends out 12,000. And $100 a month sends out 24,000 messages of hope every year, all over the world. Empower lightbearers to continue the story. Send your gift through lightbearers.org or by calling 877-585-1111. Who knew 5 little pennies could do so much?
So as we're looking at Revelation 21 and 22, Jeffrey made this powerful point that these 2 chapters at the end of the Bible are like a mirror image of the first 2 chapters of the Bible, Genesis 1 and 2. These are the only 4 chapters in the Bible that describe the world without
the sinless
sin
world.
and suffering. And so they're like, what did you call it, Jeffrey? Bookends. And then the way I've liked to describe it is that everything in between is God navigating evil. He's dealing with evil, the sin problem, and everything that is wrong with the world. He's navigating through, and he is relating to human beings in such a way that he is, on the one hand, accommodating our fallen condition. There are many things I would tell you, but you can't bear them now. So I'm going to incrementally give you truth as you can bear it, so I don't send you running away from me. And he is constantly relating with covenant promise. Now, a key part of the covenant promise through the Old Testament, where God is navigating through, is he's promising land. He's promising a city. That's right. He's promising an urban center.
He promised
thriving.
Land.
What's that?
A promised land.
A promised
Like
land.
in the Old Testament.
But he's also promising a city. We're all headed for urban living. We're going to have the whole country around us, of course. But God is describing a social network called Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem is a word that means city of shalom, or city of peace. And that's what's described here in Revelation 21. It says New Jerusalem came down to earth. There's going to be a city, there's going to be a thriving metropolis in which there are people living together, and it's called Jerusalem. Now, this concept of Jerusalem, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to take you to a passage in the Old Testament
Bring it.
that I mentioned in a previous time, but I didn't want to read it then because I really was looking forward to sharing it and talking about it right now. Isaiah chapter 2. This is a high point of Scripture. This is a mountaintop of revelation here regarding God's ultimate purpose for the world. Isaiah chapter 2. David, would you just read through?
I should probably turn there.
Yeah, or Jeffrey's there. Jeffrey, can you just read Isaiah chapter 2, starting with verse 1 through 4? 1 through 4.
The word that Isaiah the son of Amos saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. Now it shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established on the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow to it. Many people shall come and say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we shall walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between the nations, and rebuke many people. They shall beat their swords into
Plowshares.
And their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore.
To me, this passage, 2 times Jerusalem is mentioned, Zion is mentioned, and it's describing in an early passage what is more fully described in Revelation 21 and 22. This is the final establishment of God's order of things. This is the way God wants things to be, and he's promising it's going to be this way. And the way it's going to happen is that the law of God is going to be taught. And as the law of God is taught, people are going to say, oh, that's incredible. Now, do you remember in Deuteronomy where Moses said, God has given you this great body of laws? Moses was the lawgiver. Through Moses, God gave this, what the Bible calls a body of laws. And that body of laws, Moses said, when the other nations see that when these laws are implemented, there's flourishing on all levels. When you go out and when you come in, when you're in the city, when you're in the country, Moses said, things are going well for you. Everything works the way it's supposed to work when you apply God's laws. Moses said, when the people see that, when the other nations see that, they're going to come to you and say, what is this body of laws you have? Who is this God who has given you such great laws that everything seems to be flourishing and going well for you?
Wow.
It's the ultimate evangelism to live out the principles of God.
Of the kingdom of
that's
God,
what it's
yeah.
saying, of the kingdom of God. And this is promising that the effect of that will be the establishment of a city, of a place, of a Jerusalem, in which there is an elimination of war. And the poetry here, they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. This is implements of violence compared with implements of agriculture. This is the most benign possible society. This is the most brutal kind of society. And they won't teach war anymore. To me, isn't that beautiful?
It is amazing. And the word Jerusalem is peace, city of peace.
Yeah, it's shalom, but it's not the peace that is popular in a lot of circles today, especially in Western culture, has developed a fascination with the kind of Eastern mysticism kind of peace, which
Like a meditative peace.
like me peaceful by myself alone in a state of tranquility in my mind. That's not biblical
I am in peace with myself, yeah.
I'm at peace with myself. Nirvana. Biblical peace or shalom isn't a state of mental tranquility.
It's relational.
It's social peace. It's us living together without hurting one another. It's everything touching everything without harm. And that is ultimately the kind of world that God envisions for
But we're
us.
supposed to be living out those principles. We are invited
now
to experience those principles of the kingdom of God in the end now while we wait, right?
Yeah.
So we're supposed to be getting ourselves in tune to what that kind of reality will look like while we're still in this reality.
It's more than a little ironic and tragic that the city of Jerusalem on this earth, as it is now, is the most war-torn.
Wow.
Piece of real
Violent.
estate.
Yeah, what a
Yeah.
contrast, huh?
That's amazing.
There's something going on there, in that it strongly suggests that there is a great controversy, and that the resolution that we see with the New Jerusalem, as you've been describing here, Ty, when it becomes what it was intended to be. You know, the first time I think we're introduced to that is back like Genesis 14, when Melchizedek shows up, who's the Prince of Salem, this Prince of Peace. He's a Christ-like.
Jerusalem.
Yeah. There's something going on there. It's beautiful.
So that Isaiah 2 passage, I'm just showing again, I think we've mentioned this over and over again, everything in the book of Revelation is rooted in the Old Testament. All the books of the Bible meet and end in the Revelation. This material is being drawn. Chapter 2 of Isaiah is incredible, but the other one that to me is super significant in Isaiah that is talking about the new heavens and the new earth in Jerusalem is Isaiah 11.
Yes.
Isaiah 11.
When you originally said Isaiah, I thought you were going to 11. I loved 2. That's
well, in chapter
outstanding.
2, we have war eliminated, and we have God saying, essentially, my vision for the world is that all people would dwell together in an agrarian society where there is all the relationships are based on cultivating the earth, producing and sharing with one another. No currency, by the way. There's nothing about money in Revelation 21 and 22.
There is something there, though, that I think is really significant, and that is there's gates of pearl and streets of gold.
That we walk on.
In other words, gold in heaven is pavement.
Yeah.
It's blacktop.
Yeah.
Come on.
You know, Bob Dylan once had a song, the lyrics, I was raised listening to Bob Dylan, and the lyrics of the song were, I don't know, but I've been told the streets of heaven are lined with gold. I wonder if things would get much worse if the Russians happen to get up there first. Wowee, pretty scary. And the whole idea is, on Earth, all we think about is gold, wealth, getting it first, getting in space first, getting to the moon first, getting this, getting that before someone else does, greed, selfishness.
Yeah.
And what God is saying, and I just think this is absolutely fantastic, he's just saying, gold? That's pavement.
You walk on that stuff.
That's pavement.
It has no intrinsic value.
Pearls, that's a door in heaven. That's a door.
So there's like a full-on
I really
paradigm
think that's
shift.
incredible.
Yeah, between value systems. Hey.
Yes.
What's that?
It's a paradigm shift in value systems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What we value is just turned upside down, and we're introduced to what God really values. And
God help
that's
us to
this
live that way
environment.
right now.
Yeah, that's
We
it.
need that.
We're supposed to be living like that right now.
Yeah. And we are increasingly, aren't
Amen.
we?
I hope
I mean,
so.
all of you can think of relationships you have that are increasingly free of manipulation and
Yes.
control and lying and anything that is ugly and defiling, right? Relationships that grow increase in relational integrity. And so we've tasted it, right? We've tasted it.
and the-
Imagine a whole world like that.
And the more we see it in God, the more we want it. Like the wiping of the tears. It's like, oh, I've got to get to that next level. That's what we want. He appeals to us to draw us to that next level. And like you said earlier, he doesn't show us everything at one time because it would just knock us out. But then he shows us a little bit more, and we're like, oh yeah. And it's so different when God
Yeah.
shows it to us. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It's like it's attractive rather than it's condemning. Oh yeah, I want to get there. I want to get there. I want to get there.
Yeah. What do you think of the Isaiah 11 passage?
You haven't read it yet, have you?
Okay, so this is Isaiah chapter 11, and starting with
7,
verse
6, 5,
6.
6.
So the wolf also shall dwell with the lamb. That's a predatory creature with a
Domestic.
with a creature that is docile and that does no harm. The leopard shall lie down with the goat. Again, this is intentional comparison of predatory creatures with creatures that are docile, and the calf with the young lion and the fatling together. And then this incredible line, and a little child shall lead them. So try to picture this scene. You got leopard, you got lion, you got goat, you got lamb, and a little child shall lead them. Verse 7, the cow and the bear, again that comparison, shall graze together. Their young ones shall lie down together. The young ones shall lie down together. This is amazing. And the lion shall eat straw like an ox. So you got vegetarian
It's a
lions
new
in
diet.
this picture. You got vegetarian lions. The nursing child. This is a toddler.
That's an infant,
This
yeah.
is an infant, you know. The nursing child shall play by the cobra's hole, and no moms are freaking out, obviously. And the weaned child shall put his hand in the viper's den. And then verse 9 is incredible. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea.
Thank you,
That
Jesus.
text is telling us that to the degree that people have the knowledge of the Lord as the Lord really is, to the degree that we see God as God really is and get in sync with who God is, to that degree, all hurt and harm vanishes from human relations.
And that
Ty.
language reminded me there shall be hurt no more. That reminded me of there shall be war no more in the other passage.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Ty, what you just said is in verse 10. It's incredible. In that day there shall be a root of Jesse, which shall stand as an ensign of the people. Jesse was the father of David, who Jesus was identified as the son of David. So this is talking about Jesus. In that day there shall be a root of Jesse, which shall stand as an ensign. He's going to be our pattern. He's going to be our banner. This is what we want to be like, an ensign of the people. To it shall the Gentiles seek, and his rest shall be
glorious.
His rest shall be glorious.
In other words, we want to be
Peace.
like Jesus. We want to, and the Gentiles want to see Jesus. And when we see him, we're attracted to him, and we just enter into this incredible experience of rest from the labors.
There's a comparison, since you brought up David, that I think is amazing.
Oh, that's really powerful.
Because when we come to the New Jerusalem and this idea that there's no war, there are no implements of war, there's no implements of violence at all in God's final reality where God's city is established. But David, when he came to the end of his military career, said, God, I want to build you a temple now. I'm in retirement. I've been at war. I've been a king and a man of war. Now there's a history
at
here.
war.
There's a history here. The history is that when David is the king of Israel, there was one king before him, and that was Saul. And before him, all there were prophets, no kings. God explained through Moses that he did not want to govern by kings, monarchs. He wanted to govern by prophets. When you govern by a king, you govern by power. When you govern by a prophet, you govern by knowledge. A prophet is an educator. A prophet is someone who's a teacher. He's communicating. So if you relate to people through a prophet, you're relating to people according to the dignity of their potential. You're saying, You're
respecting their intellect.
You're respecting their intellect. I'm not going to micromanage you. I'm going to elevate you through knowledge. Okay? They said, no, we want a king. Eventually in their
We
history.
don't want our intellect respected.
No, we just want to, we don't want that. We want a king like the other nations around us. And God said, no, you can't have a king. They said, well, we still want one anyway. Please give us a king. And God said through his prophet, well, tell the people, don't be bummed, my prophet.
To Samuel, yeah.
Samuel, because they haven't rejected you.
They've
rejected me. So go ahead and give them a king, but tell them something for me. Tell them that if you get a king, this is what it's going to be like. The king will take your daughters as concubines. The king will take your men off to war. And the king will tax your lands. Now, one of the features of the Mosaic system was every man under his fig tree and his vine. That's the perfect state. The perfect state is property ownership. And ultimately, God wanted each Israelite was to own their own plot of land and cultivate the land and share with others with no monetary system. That is basically the whole world is a hippie commune without marijuana. so
you just said that. I love the fact that I just said that.
So here
you just betrayed your generation. But,
so here's
revealed
the thing.
Your generation.
So then David says, okay, I want to build your temple, and God does something really odd in the storyline if you don't pay attention to the nuances. Because up to that point, you have God saying, David's a man after my own heart. David, I'm blessing you. I'm giving you victory in war. God is actually empowering David to be victorious in war, according to the story. And then he says, you can't build my temple. And David essentially says, well, why not? And
you
God
were the one
says,
that was leading me through all of that. You were blessing me.
And suddenly God says, well, because you're a man of war, David. You have blood on your hands. To which David might have said, what you just
it was under your leadership. You were leading me. You gave me those victories.
But at the last minute, God disassociates himself from war. God says, okay, but David, you have to remember something. I didn't want the people to have a king at all. I wanted to set up a system of law through prophets that would attract the nations to convert to Israel. I wanted a massive evangelistic project to be going on.
All these wars was just me performing some damage control.
Accommodation is what it is.
It's me it's me navigating evil. You're the ones who want war. I don't want war ultimately, but you've given me no choice but to be with you, my people. I mean, what is my choice? Just abandon you and let the whole world go? So I've been with you,
That's such a good point.
But no, you're not building my temple, because ultimately the temple of God represents God in God's ultimate state, and that is God is not a God of violence and hostility and war. And we know that because Revelation 21 and 22 reveals that God to us. The world when it is the way God wants the world to be.
Looks like this.
Looks like this.
Thank you, Jesus.
There was another verse here that came to my mind as you were talking, Ty, and I really love that whole idea because it does wrap up the whole great controversy. I was thinking about the conquest of Canaan, because we're really entering into the new Canaan in a sense. And the conquest of Canaan, and a lot of people have this question in their mind about God, and he's sending his people in there and they're wiping out this group and they're wiping out that group and they're wiping out this other group, and it's like, what kind of God is this, you know? Well, obviously we're missing something, because God really owns all of the earth. It's all his. He can, you know, so, but the bigger picture, I think, here is what you just explained, and that is God was never into war. Well, how do you answer that question then? And the answer to it is found right here in Exodus chapter 28, or excuse me, chapter 23 and verse 28. God is telling his people about the conquest.
23 what?
23, 28. Okay. And he says, in verse 27, he says, I will send my fear before thee, and will destroy all the people to whom thou shalt come, and I will make thine enemies turn their backs unto thee. In other words, I'm going to make them run from you.
That's 28?
That's 23, 27.
Oh, 27.
Yeah. I'm going to make them run from you. And then he says, and I will send hornets before thee, which shall drive out the Hivite and the Canaanite and the Hittite from before thee.
That was the original plan.
That was the original plan. God has this original plan. This is how he operates. This is how he works. Now, the book of Revelations brought this all together for us. It's disclosure. Everything I did was in the open. I've done nothing but that which Jesus says that hasn't been done openly.
Yeah.
And so God has this plan of disclosure, and as he discloses, people say, hide us. We don't want anything to do with him. Let's go to the rocks and fall on us. We want to die. We want to die. That's what they're saying in Revelation 6. We want the rocks to fall on us. We want to die.
Yeah.
And God is simply saying, you want to die? Okay, I'll honor that. It's not as though God, I'm going to kill you. God is revealing the ultimate consequence of being at odds with him. And it's not just the New Testament. It's not just grace. It's not just Jesus. This is all the way through the Bible, from beginning to end.
Well, it's
from
not
Genesis to
just
Revelation.
grace in Jesus. It is just grace in Jesus, but what you're saying is grace in Jesus is all through the Bible.
It's not just the Old Testament.
Right.
Yeah, sorry.
There you go.
Yeah. We have to take a break, and then we have one final segment to tie this up.
The Lightbearer's Story is a short, award-winning video that gives an inside look at one of the boldest and most effective missionary ventures of our time. You will see how multiple millions of gospel publications are flooding the nations free of charge by surprisingly simple means. For your free copy of The Lightbearer's Story, call 877-585-1111 or write to Lightbearers, 37457 Jasper Lowell Road, Jasper, Oregon, 97438. Once again, for your free copy of The Lightbearer's Story, call 877-585-1111 or write to Lightbearers, 37457 Jasper Lowell Road, Jasper, Oregon, 97438. Simply ask for The Lightbearer's Story.
So Revelation 21 and 22, you guys, is extremely beautiful and powerful. One of the things we didn't mention in chapter 21 before we move on is that the New Jerusalem is described as a bride coming down out of heaven, adorned for her husband. There is a matrimonial element to the relationship between God and his people.
Amen.
There is a love that is of that highest possible order, that highest kind of love. There's a C.S. Lewis statement, and I can't remember exactly where it is, but he says that what God has in store for his people is so beautiful, it is a love of such a quality that the ecstasy of the best love between a man and a woman in this world pales into insignificance compared to the kind of love that God has in store between him and his people. So there's this bridegroom element, but then it unfolds from there. What other points do we want to draw out of chapter? Do you guys think they're significant to the fact that the holy city is measured and that it is as wide and high and it's a cube?
One thing that I will say before we get to that part, I loved the emphasis there, and you guys are giving me a hard time at the break about being so quiet, but that's not because I was disengaged, but because I was just loving the material there in Isaiah 2 and Isaiah 11. I was loving it. I was just observing. So I'll try to be a little more participatory here. But anyway, the thing I was going to say is that one of the emphasis there, and I think it's an emphasis that we need to make, and that is that our ultimate destiny is not heaven in the sense that we sometimes think of heaven, or usually think of heaven.
Of a place. Of a...
Yeah.
Actually, our destiny is earth, but...
That's what I'm saying. Our destiny is earth. We are earthly people. We are made of the dirt. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And all of those texts that you were reading...
Earth.
We have an earthy future.
Right.
And
the idea of going to heaven is more of a Greek idea.
we
that
talk
was
about it
imported
too
to
much,
Christianity.
actually. I tell people with regularity in my sermons, we talk about heaven a lot more than the New Testament. The ultimate destiny for God's people is Revelation 21 and 22. It's the new earth, where we will, and I loved what you were talking there about the agricultural, agrarian, social connectivity.
Yeah.
I loved all of that, and I was very much in that. And so I just think it's imperative that we recognize a passage of Scripture we don't have time to go to, but Romans 8, where Paul talks about the redemption of the earth.
That's groaning.
Yeah,
and our bodies.
and that earth itself awaits the adoption of the sons of God. That there is an intimate connectivity between mankind and the earth.
That's right.
And I just love that notion.
Amen.
Because as you know, I'm an outdoorsy person. I love being outside and hiking and fishing and surfing. That's not that we'll be fishing in heaven. I highly doubt that. But
In
just
earth.
in the new earth. Thank you. Just this idea that we are earthy people made for earth, and I love that.
Yeah, so do I. Yeah, that's incredible. And not only I know you're a country boy and you like the outdoorsy stuff, but also there's this city.
Yeah, when you said that, I was like,
I know, he's like, we're going to be urban. I'm like, yes.
that's Jeffrey. Where I'm
Jeffrey's
like,
the urban guy.
this guy's from Miami.
But that
I'm
is
from Wyoming.
that's so cool, though, isn't it?
Miami, Wyoming.
Because the city takes up about the space of about the size of, let's say, the state of Colorado, the state of Washington.
That's a really big, scary city.
So you've got a city, but then you've got all the rest
it's
of the
not
earth.
scary, but just a
Which, by
city
the
that
way,
big.
we didn't look at other verses that describe the fact that there's not going to be any more sea, there's not going to be any more desert, there's not going to be any more desolate places. So the entire earth outside of the state of Colorado, let's say, is all going to be inhabited by us. So we're going to have this, if you will, this high-rise apartment, this, you know.
See, none of this, that just doesn't appeal to
in
me.
the city, but then we're also going to have this beautiful place in the country.
That's right.
Well, free laundry in those apartments.
I've got to say, I don't think that, correct me if I'm wrong here, when John says there was no more sea in verse 1, I don't think that means there is no more sea. Because Revelation doesn't mean what it says, it means what it means.
But I didn't say that. If you want me to elucidate on that, I'll say it this way. There's not going to be any more waste places. There's not going to be any more large...
How about this? How about this? I think it's Isaiah 33, where it says that the desert shall blossom like a rose. He's just saying that the whole earth is going to be a flourishing world.
Right.
And most life occurs in the ocean. Most biological life is in the water.
Right.
Right now. So it's not a desert. It's not a desolate place.
But it serves a separation between peoples. We are separated
I think that's the
from one
point that
another.
John is making.
Not only
There shall
that,
be no
because when he gets to
separation.
verse 3, he says, with.
Not only that, but the point I'm making is there's not going to be, the large bodies of waters are not necessary
Well, I
at
don't
that
know.
time.
We'll see when we get there, because here, this is the point I think that John is making. He's on an island. He's in the Aegean Sea. He's cut off from everything that's near and dear to him. The sea for him is separation. It's disconnection. It's exile. It's isolation. So I think that's what he's saying. There won't be this separation, and the reason I think that is I don't think he's just making a geological statement here.
It's with.
It's with.
Yeah,
There's
I
no
get
more
that.
separation.
I get that.
But James
I
is
got no-
actually making the same point, because what he didn't get to yet and where he's going is
that there's still going to be large bodies of water, which we call sea or oceans.
As long as they're big enough to have tides and waves.
That's what I'm talking about. That's going to be there. But what I'm talking about is most of the earth right now is not land.
Yeah,
most of the
two-thirds.
earth right now cannot be used. And I don't think that's the way God created it in the beginning. In the beginning, there was this mist that came up, but I don't think it eliminates the whale. God made the fish and the whales and all of it.
that's right.
They're there. There's just that it's not going to be, just like today, we have deserts, and I think there's going to be this place where we can see that the landscape is a little bit different.
There'll
dry,
be
whatever.
diversity.
Right. but
Geographical
no waste.
diversity.
Nothing will be wasted.
I agree with that.
That's all I'm saying.
But check this out, you guys. It says in this chapter that the city, I was asking about this.
Measured?
It's measured,
Yeah.
and it's a cube.
Symmetry.
And the reason I think that's significant is symbolic. I don't know how literal the actual, that it's a square, that it's a cube, but let's just say it is exactly a cube. Somebody did the measurement and they said, compared to the size of the earth, that it would tilt the earth off its axis. But God can overcome all the physics of it. So here's the thing. This cube is essentially saying, see if you guys can, does this make sense? The Old Testament revealed the sanctuary, and Revelation is full of sanctuary language. The sanctuary indicated that there was a separation between God and human beings. The people live out in the camp around the sanctuary in the courtyard. They are represented through the priest, and at the center of the whole thing is the most holy place, which is described in the Old Testament with its measurements, 20 cubits by 20 cubits by 20 cubits. It's a perfect cube. That place is the only place in the temple system where the visible presence of God dwells. That is the Shekinah glory. And I think that what this is saying is that all the separation that sin caused between human beings and God,
I agree,
is going to be completely eliminated.
We're left with the Shekinah.
Everybody's destination is most holy place level intimacy with God.
Agreed.
That's what it's saying.
I like that.
When the high priest would go into the most holy place once a year on the 10th day of the 7th month, in the Old Testament dispensation, he had all of those gems.
Yes.
He brought representation of all of Israel in. Okay, well that was in the shadowy, sin-filled world. In the absence of that sin-filled, shadowy
No
world,
representation
we'll
needed.
all be having, and I think this is your point, a most holy place experience.
Yeah, we'll all be in intimate.
And check this out. That is strongly communicated in Revelation 22, verse 4. And let me just read verse 1 to set it up.
Okay.
Right through. And he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne of God and of the Lamb. In the middle of its street and on either side of the river was the tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding its fruit every month. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. And there shall be no more curse, but the throne of God and of the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him, and they shall see his face, and his name shall be on their foreheads. That level of intimacy.
Incredible.
That is an exact return to the Edenic ideal of Genesis 1 and 2, face-to-face communion. Now we see through a glass darkly, Paul said in 1 Corinthians 13, but then
Face-to-face.
face-to-face. So that is a most holy place experience.
Yeah, it's incredible. Face-to-face with God, the God of the
Remember, God
universe.
said to Moses, no man, oh God, I want to see what you're like. Okay, in the cleft of the rock, put my hand over you, only my back parts, because no man can see my face and live.
Yeah. And yet here, that's where we're all destined.
So the whole
face.
heaven, new earth thing, it's not about the gold or the pearls.
Certainly
or the,
not.
None of that.
That's pavements
it's
and
about the
doors.
presence
The
of God.
point is face-to-face communion
That's
with
the
God.
point. That's the point.
the
That's the
point.
only thing that makes the
And
city.
By the way, you
or-
see the curse in verse 3? There shall be no more curse. That's Genesis 3 language, right? That's the original gospel promise.
Cursed is the ground for your sake.
And the
That's
reason
right.
why the curse came was because of the fall. And the reason why the fall came was because of this guy right here, the serpent.
Notice I turned him upside down.
He was turned upside down in Revelation chapter 20, but when we get to Revelation chapter 21 and chapter 22, this guy is off the table.
He was waiting to do that.
Did the cameraman survive that? Did you just?
He was waiting to do that for like an hour.
You wanted to do
No,
that.
I agree. I love it. I
He's
love it.
absolutely
And all the
gone.
kingdoms of the world. No, I'm just kidding. What leave Daniel 2 down?
Become the kingdom.
Speaking of the kingdoms of the world, speaking of the kingdoms of the world, one final point that I think is amazing.
I love the fact you just threw the trash.
I love it too.
He's off.
I didn't want him on the table ever to begin with.
He's off.
Yeah,
we
that's
had to
great.
endure
None of us
time.
do,
You
but we had to endure it.
That's right, that's right. But check this out, you guys. This is a point that just recently occurred to me. In chapter 21, verses 23 through 27, the Lamb is the light of the new heavens and the new earth and the new Jerusalem. And it says in verse 24, and the nations of those who are saved, the nations of those who are saved shall walk in its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory and their honor to it. Okay,
Nations.
Nations. So it's not now a homogenous society where everybody is the same. Human culture and art, everything that makes unique people unique, the nations and their various different ways of
Cultures.
speaking and being, all the beautiful stuff is retained and the bad stuff is deleted. And everything good about human beings and their individual expressions, it says they bring all their glory, the glory of the nations, and all their honor, all the things they've developed, and they bring it and they bring it into this new society.
But we'll probably speak Spanish though in heaven. Right?
Well, some will.
That'll be. I'm saying that'll
Maybe
be
some
the
will.
language of God's kingdom.
But do you see that point?
I get your
Yeah.
point, and let me buttress that point by saying that whether you look at the whole world, the biological world, it is obvious, the genetic world, that God values variety. Clearly, God values variety. Somebody just said to me recently that the incense in the sanctuary was combined of, it took, cinnamon and nutmeg, that it makes, that there's variety. You look at birds, there's 10,000 species of birds. You know, they just have all of this indication that God values variety. So why would we think that when we get to the best expression of God's creative goodness, that homogeneity reigns? It's like, no, all the same now. No, not going to be
God is
that way.
redeeming the earth. God is redeeming our bodies.
Yes.
God is redeeming culture.
You know,
He's
Why not?
redeeming the human
So the
race.
best of what every culture has to offer is
Is brought in.
concentrated,
The glory
brought
and honor
in
of the nations brought to
the
It says it twice. It says it in verse 24 with the kings, and then it says it in verse 26 again. It says, and they shall bring the glory and honor of the nations into it.
And we have 7 seconds left to say,
Cheers.
this was incredible.
I loved
This
it.
has been an enjoyable experience studying the book of Revelation together.
Indeed.